Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into some really interesting new research. It's from the University of Surrey, and it looks at whether cutting carbs could, give you similar metabolic benefits to intermittent fasting. How your body handles energy, basically.
You're right.
You're here to get smart, fast, on wellness stuff that matters, and, well, that's what we aim to do.
Exactly. We're focusing on a study that just came out in the European Journal of Nutrition, March, I think.
Yeah, sounds right.
And the big question is, can you get those metabolic wins, like with fasting, just by lowering carbs, even if you don't slash your calories way down?
Okay, let's unpack that, because intermittent fasting usually involves cutting calories pretty significantly, doesn't it?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
That's a common feature. People might eat a lot less on certain days or within certain windows.
So our mission here is to understand if maybe just reducing carbs can do something similar without that big calorie drop. What did this Surrey study actually do?
Okay, so they took adults aged between 20 and 65 who were classified as overweight or obese, and they had them follow 3 different one-day diet plans, sort of rotated them through.
3 different plans. What were they?
Well, one was just a standard carb diet, kind of a baseline.
Okay.
Then there was a low-carb plan, but with normal calorie intake for the day.
Right. Low carb, normal calories. Got it.
And the third was also low carb, but this one did have a substantial calorie restriction, more like what you might see in some short-term fasting approaches.
Ah, okay. So comparing standard low carb, normal calical and low carb, low cal makes sense.
Exactly.
And the key thing for everyone listening, what did they find? What were the results?
Well, here's what's really interesting. The researchers found that both of the low-carb diets led to improvements in metabolic markers.
Both. So the one with normal calories and the one with fewer calories.
That's right. Both showed positive changes compared to the standard diet day.
Okay, what kind of changes? Can we get specific?
Sure. One big thing was how participants handled a high-fat meal afterwards. In both low-carb groups, they managed it better.
Better how?
Their bodies showed reduced levels of triglycerides after the meal. That's a type of fat in the blood,
Yeah. Linked to heart disease risk, isn't it?
Precisely. So lower levels are generally good. And another thing, both low-carb groups showed signs of shifting towards burning more fat for energy.
So the body started using fat stores more effectively, even when calories weren't drastically cut, just the carbs.
It seems that way, based on these short-term results. It suggests the carb restriction itself was having a noticeable metabolic effect.
So you might not need the huge calorie deficit to kickstart some of those changes.
Well, that's what one of the authors, Dr. Adam Collins, pointed towards. He mentioned that just restricting the carbohydrates seemed to produce metabolic effects similar to what they see with short-term fasting.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he suggested it could be, potentially a more accessible or maybe sustainable approach for some people compared to very strict fasting routines.
Okay, but what about hunger? That's always the big question with low carb or fasting, right?
Yeah.
Feeling deprived.
Good point. And they did look at that. Participants did report feeling hungrier on the low carbohydrate days.
I'm not surprised.
But get this, when they looked at food intake over the next 2 days, it hadn't actually increased.
Really? So they felt hungrier but didn't, overeat to make up for it?
Apparently not, at least not in the immediate follow-up period they measured. It suggests the body might sort of adapt, or maybe other factors kept intake stable. It's quite interesting.
It is. So stepping back, what are the broader implications here? What should someone tuning in take away from this?
Well, Dr. Collins framed it as potentially offering a promising, maybe alternative dietary approach for metabolic health.
For conditions like type 2 diabetes or heart disease, obesity.
Exactly, those sorts of metabolic conditions. The idea that maybe, just maybe, significant calorie restriction isn't the only path or even the primary driver sometimes for these specific metabolic improvements, that's pretty significant food for thought.
So the key takeaway for you listening might be this. Simply reducing your carbohydrate intake, even without making huge cuts to your overall calories, might be a simpler route to some of the metabolic benefits we associate with intermittent fasting.
Yeah, it's less about drastic deprivation and potentially more about the type of calories, at least for these specific metabolic effects.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to mull over. Instead of just thinking about cutting calories, how might periodically adjusting your carbohydrate intake fit into your own approach to health?
Right. Could tweaking carbs sometimes be a useful tool in your wellness toolkit, separate from just focusing on the calorie count? It certainly challenges some traditional dieting advice, doesn't it?
It definitely does. Something to consider.